The moment you become indispensable, you become disposable. Think about it. How many times have you bent over backwards to help someone, only to watch them discard you the second you couldn't deliver? You thought being useful would make you valuable. Instead, it made you a tool. Here's the brutal truth Machiavelli understood 5 centuries ago. Utility is the fastest path to invisibility. The most powerful people in any hierarchy aren't the ones doing the work, they're the ones controlling the perception of value. Every hour you spend proving your worth is an hour someone else spends consolidating their power over you. In this video, I'll reveal Machiavelli's forbidden strategy for transforming from servant to sovereign. You'll learn why being dangerous is infinitely more valuable than being useful, and exactly how to weaponize scarcity to command respect without lifting a finger. But I need to warn you, once you see this, you can't unsee it. In 1513, Niccolo Machiavelli sat in exile, stripped of power, tortured by the very state he had served faithfully for 14 years. He had been useful to the Florentine Republic. He had been competent, reliable, indispensable, and when the political wind shifted, none of that mattered. They threw him away like a broken instrument. During those dark months, Machiavelli wrote The Prince not as philosophy, but as a survival manual. He had learned the most dangerous lesson of power. The servant, no matter how skilled, remains a servant. The man who makes himself necessary makes himself a target. The man who makes himself mysterious becomes untouchable. Modern society has buried this knowledge under mountains of feel-good productivity culture. They tell you to add value, to be a team player, to demonstrate your worth through endless output. Every corporate training, every self-help book, every leadership seminar preaches the same gospel: make yourself useful. But here's what they're not telling you. This is how hierarchies maintain themselves. By convincing you that your labor equals your value, they ensure you never threaten the structure itself. You're too busy being useful to become powerful. The masses operate under a simple equation: effort equals reward. They believe visibility through usefulness creates security. Watch them. Watch how they volunteer for every project, answer every email instantly, make themselves available at all hours. They're everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Forgettable in their reliability. You're different. You're watching this because some part of you has already sensed a trap. You've felt the exhaustion of being everyone's solution. You've noticed how the less you do, the more certain people panic. That panic, that's the sound of your value becoming visible. Machiavelli identified this in chapter 3 of The Prince. Men ought either to be well treated or crushed, because they can avenge themselves of lighter injuries. Of more serious ones, they cannot. The useful person can be injured lightly, constantly, without consequence. The dangerous person cannot be touched without calculation. But there's something even more sinister operating beneath this dynamic. Something about human psychology that Machiavelli understood but rarely stated explicitly. We'll get to that in a moment. First, you need to understand the foundational mechanism. Power operates on scarcity, not abundance. The useful person offers abundance, constant availability, predictable output, reliable solutions. This creates contempt, not respect. The human brain doesn't value what it can easily access. We value what withdraws from us, what remains unpredictable, what carries consequence. The dangerous person operates entirely differently, and once you learn these 4 principles, you'll never see social dynamics the same way again. The principle of calculated absence. Power accumulates in the vacuum you create. Here's the first law. Your presence must be an event, not a condition. The useful person is atmospheric, always there, like oxygen, only noticed when absent. The dangerous person is meteorological, arriving with force, departing with impact, remembered in the silence between appearances. Machiavelli observed this in the most successful princes of Renaissance Italy. They didn't govern through constant visibility. They governed through strategic manifestation. When they appeared, decisions were made. When they withdrew, speculation filled the void. That speculation did more work than 1,000 proclamations. Why does this work? Because the human brain is wired for pattern prediction. We feel safe when we can predict behavior. The useful person is perfectly predictable. Ask, and they deliver. Push, and they comply. This predictability creates psychological dismissal. Your mind categorizes them as solved and stops paying attention. But introduce unpredictability, and the brain's threat detection system activates. Not knowing when you'll appear, what you'll demand, or how you'll respond keeps people in a state of heightened awareness around you. They think about you when you're not there. They prepare for you. They negotiate with your absence. Let me show you exactly how this plays out. In 2009, a senior executive at a Fortune 500 company, we'll call him Marcus, was drowning in his own competence. He was the fixer. Every crisis, every complex problem, every impossible deadline landed on his desk. He worked 70-hour weeks. His performance reviews were exceptional. His influence was non-existent. Then Marcus disappeared. Not permanently, he took a 3-week vacation to Southeast Asia, somewhere with unreliable internet. He didn't check email, didn't respond to calls. For 21 days, the company had to function without him. Chaos erupted, projects stalled, meetings were postponed. His absence created a vacuum that revealed the true scope of his influence. When he returned, something had fundamentally shifted. People approached him differently. Requests came with deference, not entitlement. His compensation increased 40% within 6 months. Not because he worked more, but because they had experienced the cost of his absence. This is the power of the vacuum. Marcus hadn't changed his skills. He had changed his scarcity. Now, here's the deeper mechanism at play. When you're constantly available, you train people to devalue your time. Every instant response to an email teaches them your attention is cheap. Every dropped boundary to accommodate their urgency teaches them your priorities are negotiable. You're not being helpful, you're being trained. The dangerous person does the opposite. They create strategic delay. They establish response windows that work on their schedule, not others. When they do engage, it's complete, focused, and valuable, which makes the scarcity acceptable, even desirable. This doesn't mean becoming unreliable or incompetent. It means understanding that your absence is as strategic as your presence. The useful person fills every gap. The dangerous person selects which gaps deserve filling. Watch how powerful people move through organizations. They're not in every meeting, they're not in every email chain, they're not solving every problem. But when they enter a room, the room changes. When they speak, people listen. When they commit to something, it happens. Their scarcity is the container for their value. You need to build your own container. Start tracking where your time goes. Every request you fulfill, every fire you fight, every gap you fill, write it down. You'll discover something disturbing. Most of what you do is training others to consume you. Now, most people stop here. They understand calculated absence intellectually, but fail in implementation because they're afraid of the discomfort. But that's why they fail. There's a second layer to this that determines whether your absence creates value or just reveals your irrelevance. The principle of controlled dependency. Make them need what only you provide. Here's where it gets darker. Absence alone isn't power, it's just absence. The dangerous person doesn't simply withdraw. They create specific dependencies that cannot be easily replaced, then control access to those dependencies with ruthless precision. Machiavelli wrote in chapter 9, "A prince must make himself feared in such a way that, if he does not gain love, he at least avoids hatred." But there's a mechanism beneath this that he understood implicitly. Fear without dependency is just intimidation. Fear with dependency is control. The psychological lever here is specificity. The useful person offers general value, they're good, and many things, which paradoxically makes them replaceable. Someone else can learn those skills. Someone cheaper, younger, more convenient, can be trained to fill that role. General competence is a commodity, but specific, irreplaceable value, that's a monopoly. This operates on a principle from behavioral psychology called unique sourcing. The human mind categorizes providers into fungible and unique. Fungible providers compete on availability and cost. Unique providers operate in a category of one. They set terms, they command they are not compared, they are either chosen or the outcome changes fundamentally. Let me show you this principle in its most naked form. In 1503, Cesare Borgia, one of Machiavelli's primary inspirations for the prince, faced a crisis. His mercenary commanders were becoming too powerful, too independent. They were useful, certainly, but their usefulness gave them leverage. They could threaten to withhold their forces. Borgia's solution was surgical. He invited them to a meeting in Senegalia under the pretense of negotiation. When they arrived, he had them arrested. 2 were strangled that night. The others were imprisoned within 24 hours. Borgia had replaced them with commanders who understood a different arrangement. Their usefulness was permitted only as long as they remained dependent on his favor. Brutal, absolutely. But notice the mechanism. Borgia didn't eliminate usefulness. He restructured dependency. The new commanders were equally skilled, but they lacked the independent power bases of their predecessors. They couldn't threaten withdrawal because they had nowhere else to go. Now, you're not orchestrating Renaissance power plays, but the principle scales perfectly to modern hierarchies. The dangerous person engineers situations where their specific knowledge, relationships, or capabilities cannot be easily transferred. They become the bottleneck by design. This is not about hoarding information out of insecurity. This is about strategic positioning. You identify what you do that generates disproportionate value, the thing that, if you stopped doing it, would create immediate, measurable consequences. Then you make that thing more opaque, more specialized, more dependent on your unique combination of skills and relationships. The useful person documents everything, trains everyone, makes themselves replaceable in the name of efficiency. They think they're demonstrating leadership. They're actually demonstrating their own If you're still watching, you're already ahead of 90% who clicked away, because this makes them uncomfortable. They want power without the uncomfortable truths about how power actually works. They want influence without strategy. That's why they stay trapped in usefulness while wondering why others with less talent advance past them. Here's what you need to understand. Controlled dependency isn't manipulation if you're actually delivering irreplaceable value. You're not deceiving anyone. You're simply refusing to train your replacement while you're still occupying the position. The dangerous person asks, what do I control that cannot be easily replicated? What relationships route through me? What knowledge exists primarily in my possession? What would stop functioning if I withdrew? Then they make that dependency more specific, more concentrated, more valuable, and they never, ever give it away for free or out of the goodness of their heart. But here's the critical piece most people miss. Dependency without mystery breeds resentment. The next principle is where it gets truly dangerous. The principle of strategic opacity. They must never fully understand you the moment people understand your complete pattern. You lose power over them. Machiavelli knew this instinctively. Everyone sees what you appear to be. Few experience what you really are. The useful person is transparent. Their motives are obvious. Their methods are clear. Their limits are known. The dangerous person remains partially encrypted. This operates on a primal psychological mechanism. The unknown triggers hypervigilance. When we can't fully model someone's thinking, we assign them more capability than they might actually possess. We prepare for a wider range of responses. We approach with more caution. Uncertainty expands your perceived power beyond its actual boundaries. Think about the people who intimidate you, not the ones who are overtly aggressive. Aggression is predictable, and predictability diminishes threat. I'm talking about the people whose calm unreadability makes you second-guess yourself. You don't know what they're thinking. You don't know where their boundaries are. You don't know what provokes them or what they value. That unknown creates a buffer of caution around them. The useful person eliminates all mystery. They explain their reasoning. They justify their decisions. They make their internal state visible in the misguided belief that transparency builds trust. Sometimes it does, but it never builds power. Here's this principle in action. In 1502, Machiavelli himself was sent as an envoy to negotiate with Cesare Borgia. He spent months observing Borgia's methods, and one pattern disturbed him more than the violence: Borgia's complete emotional opacity. Borgia would shower allies with attention one day, ignore them the next. He would seem ready to strike, then withdraw inexplicably. He would make promises that seemed sincere, then reverse course without explanation. Machiavelli couldn't establish a predictive model. Every time he thought he understood Borgia's pattern, Borgia would introduce a variable that shattered the model. This wasn't chaos. This was weaponized unpredictability. Borgia ensured that no one around him could fully forecast his next move, which meant no one could effectively plot against him. The conspiracy that eventually destroyed him only succeeded when he was weakened by illness, when his opacity faltered. Now, contrast this with how most people operate. They need to be understood. They need to be validated. They explain themselves, constantly seeking approval and alignment. Every explanation is a blueprint. Every justification is a map of their internal logic. They're making it easy for others to predict, manipulate, and ultimately control them. What weak people do, over-explain. Seek consensus, need external validation of their reasoning, make their decision-making process transparent. What powerful people do, decide without justification. Allow misunderstanding without correction. Maintain private counsel. Let their actions speak while their reasoning remains obscure. This is where you need to be careful. Strategic opacity isn't mysteriousness for its own sake. It's not playing games or being deliberately confusing. It's the selective revelation of information. You let people see the outcomes, but not the full process. You share decisions, but not always the reasoning. You establish patterns, then occasionally break them to prevent full predictability. The dangerous person masters the art of the incomplete. Answer when someone asks why you made a decision. You give them enough to satisfy immediate curiosity, but not enough to fully reverse engineer your thinking. It serves the broader objective, tells them nothing about what that objective is or how you weighted various factors. Watch how this plays in negotiations. The useful person comes with full transparency. Here's my budget, here's my timeline, here's what I need. They think honesty will build goodwill. Instead, they've given away every lever. The dangerous person reveals information strategically, forcing the other side to negotiate against uncertainty. But knowing these first three principles isn't enough. Most people who learn this will try to implement them in isolation and fail spectacularly. Because there's a fourth element that binds everything together, the element Machiavelli called virtuous, which actually means something far more ruthless than virtue. The principle of consequence architecture. Make your displeasure expensive. Here's the final, most powerful principle. Usefulness means accommodating others' convenience. Danger means imposing cost for violating your boundaries. The useful person absorbs disrespect, boundary violations, and exploitation because they fear the social cost of enforcement. The dangerous person engineers consequences so severe that a violation becomes unthinkable. Machiavelli stated this in its most raw form. Upon this, one has to remark that men ought either to be well treated or crushed. There's no middle ground. Partial consequences teach people they can test your boundaries with acceptable risks. Total consequences teach people your boundaries are walls, not suggestions. This is forbidden knowledge because it requires something most people have been socialized to suppress: the willingness to let others experience pain as a teaching mechanism. The psychological principle here is operant conditioning. Behavior that receives inconsistent consequences becomes persistent. If someone disrespects you, and sometimes you respond, sometimes you don't, they learn that disrespect is ludicrous. They'll keep tussling. But behavior that receives swift, disproportionate consequence becomes immediately extinguished. Watch how this operated in Machiavelli's most famous example, when the city of Pistoia split into factions and threatened rebellion. Florence sent mediators and tried diplomatic solutions. The conflict intensified. But when the city of rebelled, Cesare Borgia sent troops who crushed the uprising with overwhelming force, then installed a governor so ruthless that the entire region remained peaceful for years. The difference: Florence made rebellion negotiable. Borgia made it catastrophically expensive. Now, you're not leading military campaigns, but you are managing relationships, professional dynamics, and social positioning. And every time someone violates your boundaries without consequence, you're teaching them that violation is acceptable. The useful person says, "It's fine, I'll just do it myself." The dangerous person says nothing, but the violator soon discovers that access, opportunity, or goodwill has vanished. This is where most people can't stomach the truth. You must be willing to cut people off completely, not as revenge, not out of anger, but as policy. Someone crosses a clearly established boundary. They experience the full cost of that choice. The mechanism is removal of access. You had a pathway to my time, knowledge, resources, or influence. That pathway is now closed. There's no discussion, no second chances, no gradual rebuilding. The cost of violation is total exile from the benefits of the relationship. Here's what Machiavelli never explicitly wrote but clearly understood. The most powerful form of consequence isn't what you do to people. It's what you stop doing for them. The person who is accustomed to your responsiveness now experiences silence. The colleague who relied on your expertise now solves problems alone. The relationship that benefited from your generosity now operates under pure transaction. This requires emotional detachment that most people cannot maintain. They want to be liked. They want to be seen as reasonable. They want to preserve the relationship. These wants make them exploitable. The dangerous person wants only one thing: respected boundaries. Like them or hate them, they're indifferent. Respect the framework or lose access, those are the options. And when you start operating this way, something remarkable happens. The number of boundary violations drops to near zero. Because word spreads, people learn, you become known not as difficult, but as someone who takes themselves seriously. Someone whose tolerance has limits. Someone dangerous. Now watch how these 4 principles combine into a unified power system. You establish calculated absence, which creates the vacuum. Within that vacuum, you've positioned yourself as a unique source for specific high-value capabilities, so your absence is felt as deprivation, not relief. A dependency is real, a need is acute. But because you maintain strategic capacity, people can't fully predict when you'll engage or what will trigger your investment. They can't manipulate you through your known patterns because you've deliberately disrupted pattern consistency. They approach you with uncertainty, which elevates their caution and your perceived authority. And threading through all of this, consequence architecture. The few who test these boundaries discover immediately and absolutely that the cost of violation is exile. This enforcement is what transforms the first 3 principles from theory into reality. Without consequences, absence looks like flakiness, dependency looks like luck, and opacity looks like confusion. Together, they form a defense system. You're not trying to dominate every interaction. You're engineering an ecosystem where your power is automatic, where the structure itself does the work. People self-regulate around you because the incentives are clear. Cooperation gives access to your scarce, valuable, unique capabilities. Violation results in permanent expulsion. This is how you stop being useful and become dangerous. The useful person is a resource. The dangerous person is a force that must be accounted for. Now some will say this is manipulation, that it's Machiavellian, which of course it is. But power doesn't care about labels. Power cares about results. You can clutch your moral purity while others advance past you. Or you can understand that every hierarchy, every organization, every social structure already operates on these principles. The only question is whether you're conscious of the game or just a piece being moved by those who are. The world is divided into players and pieces. Pieces believe their usefulness will be rewarded. They believe fairness governs outcomes. They believe hard work and good intentions create security. And they die believing these things while wondering why the players who understood the actual rules accumulated all the power. You're at a choice point. You can return to usefulness, to the comfortable lie that your labor equals your value, to the exhausting performance of constant availability, or you can accept what Machiavelli tried to teach. That human hierarchies operate on perceived power. That perceived power comes from strategic scarcity, and that scarcity combined with consequence creates danger. And in every power structure, the dangerous are left alone to operate while the useful are consumed until there's nothing left. Here's exactly how you begin this transformation, starting today. Step 1. Conduct a usefulness audit. For the next 7 days, track every request made of you and your response time. Every email, message, favor, question. You're looking for patterns of exploitation disguised as collaboration. The person who only contacts you when they need something. The colleague who treats your expertise as their personal resource. The relationship that takes but never reciprocates. Identify the 3 highest cost, lower strain usefulness drains. These are your targets. Step 2. Implement strategic delay. Choose a response window that works for your schedule. Maybe you check email twice daily. Maybe you return calls within 24 hours. Establish it and enforce it without exception or apology. No more instant responses. No more accommodating urgency that isn't yours. You're training people that your attention operates on your timeline. The discomfort they feel is the market pricing your scarcity correctly. Step 3. Identify your monopoly. What do you do that creates disproportionate value and cannot be easily replicated? This isn't about being the best, it's about being the only one with your specific combination of skills, relationships, and context. Once identified, stop teaching it. Stop documenting it in ways that make you replaceable. Make your continued involvement necessary for the outcome. Step 4. Establish one absolute boundary and enforce it with permanent consequence. Pick something. Clear. Maybe you don't work weekends. Maybe you don't engage with people who interrupt you. Maybe you don't respond to requests that come without proper context. State it once if needed, but preferably demonstrate it through action. When someone violates it, they experience complete removal of access, no explanation, no second chance. One person experiencing this consequence will communicate to 10 others that you're serious. Step 5. Practice strategic silence. When someone asks why you made a decision, resist the urge to fully explain. Give them outcome without process. When someone asks about your availability, resist committing to patterns they can exploit. When someone tests your boundary, resist engaging in negotiation. Silence is your most powerful communication. You now know what 99% of people will never understand. That power isn't granted, it's architectured. You've just learned what took Machiavelli a lifetime of service, betrayal, and exile to discover that usefulness is servitude, wearing the mask of value. That danger is protection disguised as threat. That the only security in any hierarchy comes not from what you give, but from what you withhold. Most people will watch this video and do nothing. They'll nod along, maybe take a note or two, then return to the exact patterns that keep them powerless. They'll keep answering every email instantly, keep accommodating every request, keep explaining themselves to people who don't deserve access to their reasoning. And they'll wonder why others respect them so little. That's their choice. You have a different option. If this resonates with the part of you that's exhausted from performing, from proving, from being endlessly available to people who wouldn't cross the street for youth, then you already know what comes next. Subscribe to this channel because we're going deeper into the mechanisms of power that society works desperately to keep hidden from you. Every video is a weapon for those willing to use it. The algorithms reward hesitation. So, if you're still here, still considering, still evaluating, make the decision. Because the dangerous person doesn't wait for permission to claim their power. The choice is yours. But remember this, ignorance is not bliss, it's slavery. And the world has enough servants already.